The morning sun cast a golden glow over the manicured greens of the Ridgecrest Golf Club, a haven for the wealthy and powerful. Gregory Barnes, the club's meticulous manager, prided himself on maintaining exclusivity, a place where only the right kind of people could set foot. He had spent years enforcing his unspoken rules, wielding his authority like a shield against anything he deemed disruptive. As Gregory adjusted his tie in the clubhouse mirror, he caught sight of a man walking toward the entrance. The man's presence immediately set Gregory on edge. Dressed in a tailored suit, with polished shoes that gleamed against the cobblestone path, the man exuded confidence. Yet, for Gregory, one detail overshadowed everything else. The man was black. "Excuse me, sir," Gregory barked, stepping outside with 2 security guards trailing him. "Can I help you?" The man stopped, his dark eyes meeting Gregory's with an unflinching gaze. "I have an appointment," he said, his voice calm but firm. Gregory smirked. "An appointment? Here. Are you sure you're in the right place?" The man didn't flinch. "I'm quite certain." "Well," Gregory said, crossing his arms, "this is a private establishment. You can't just walk in without being a member or an invited guest." The tension in the air was palpable. Club members lounging nearby watched with quiet curiosity, some whispering among themselves. Gregory's tone grew sharper. "Do you even know what kind of place this is?" The man tilted his head slightly, as if assessing Gregory. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black card embossed with gold letters. It bore the name Elijah Walker. "I believe this should suffice," Elijah said, handing the card to Gregory. Gregory snatched the card and glanced at it, his expression souring. "This doesn't prove anything," he snapped. "For all I know, you picked this up off the ground." Elijah smiled faintly, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps you should call your board of directors. They'll confirm my identity." Gregory hesitated, his confidence wavering, but his pride wouldn't let him relent. "I don't need to call anyone," he said. "You're not coming in." At that moment, one of the security guards, sensing the growing tension, murmured, "Maybe we should double-check, Mr. Barnes." Gregory shot him a glare. "Stay out of it." Elijah sighed, his patience clearly thinning. He turned and began walking away, but not before saying over his shoulder, "You'll regret this." Gregory watched him leave, his chest puffed up with self-satisfaction. "Another wannabe trying to climb where he doesn't belong," he muttered. But as Elijah disappeared from view, Gregory had no idea that his life, and the very ground he stood on, was about to change forever. The Ridgecrest boardroom was a picture of opulence: mahogany walls, a long, polished table, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the 18th hole. Elijah Walker sat at the head of the table, his fingers interlocked as he watched the assembled board members squirm in their seats. He had long since learned that silence was a weapon. It forced people to fill the void with their own discomfort. The board had convened for a special session at Elijah's request. None of them could ignore the significance of his presence. Elijah wasn't just another wealthy investor. He was a self-made man, a visionary whose name carried weight in industries ranging from real estate to tech. And now, he was about to finalize his acquisition of Ridgecrest Golf Club. "Mr. Walker," began Charles Aldridge, the chairman of the board. His voice wavered slightly, betraying his nerves. "We're honored to have you here. Your interest in Ridgecrest is, of course, a great privilege for us." Elijah leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I appreciate that, Mr. Aldridge," he said. "Though I must admit, my experience at your club earlier today was enlightening." Charles exchanged nervous glances with the other board members. "Enlightening," Elijah allowed the pause to linger before speaking. "Your manager, Mr. Gregory Barnes, made it abundantly clear that he didn't think I belonged here." The room fell silent. Charles's face reddened. I assure you, Mr. Walker, That's not representative of Ridgecrest's values. Gregory is, well, he can be overzealous in his duties. Overzealous, Elijah repeated, his tone laced with quiet sarcasm. Is that what we're calling blatant disrespect now? A younger board member, Claire Whitman, cleared her throat. Mr. Walker, we deeply regret any offense caused. Gregory's actions are unacceptable, and we'll address the matter immediately. Elijah fixed his gaze on her. You'll have the opportunity to do so very soon. But first, let's address the matter at hand. He slid a folder across the table. This is the finalized agreement for my purchase of Ridgecrest. Charles hurriedly opened the folder, scanning the documents. His expression shifted from anxiety to a strained smile. Everything seems to be in order. With your approval, Mr. Walker, the club will officially be under your ownership by the end of the day. Good, Elijah said, his voice calm but firm. I'll sign, but I have a few conditions. Conditions? Charles asked nervously. Elijah stood, towering over the seated board members. First, I expect full transparency regarding Ridgecrest's policies and practices. That includes employment records, membership applications, and incident reports. The board members nodded quickly, eager to appease him. Second, Elijah continued, I'll be implementing a new code of conduct, one that reflects inclusivity and respect. Anyone who can't align with those values won't have a place here. Charles hesitated. That's quite reasonable. And lastly, Elijah said, his voice hardening, Gregory Barnes will no longer be employed at this club. His actions today were not just unprofessional. They were a direct affront to everything I stand for. The room tensed. Charles opened his mouth to respond, but Elijah held up a hand. I don't need a debate, Mr. Aldridge. This is non-negotiable. If Ridgecrest is to succeed under my ownership, there's no room for people like Gregory. After a beat of silence, Charles nodded reluctantly. Understood. Elijah smiled faintly. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a golf club to inspect. Later that afternoon, Elijah returned to Ridgecrest, his presence drawing curious glances from members and staff alike. He walked with purpose, his tailored suit and unshakable confidence commanding attention. Gregory Barnes was pacing near the entrance, barking orders at the staff, when he noticed Elijah approaching. His face darkened. You again? He sneered. Didn't I make myself clear earlier? Elijah stopped a few feet away, his expression calm but piercing. You did, Mr. Barnes. And now I'm here to return the favor. Gregory crossed his arms, his arrogance undimmed. Oh, really? And what's that supposed to mean? Elijah pulled a document from his pocket and handed it to Gregory. This, he said simply, is the deed to Ridgecrest Golf Club. As of 2 hours ago, I own this place. Gregory's face turned a sickly shade of pale as he scanned the paper. You… what? I own Ridgecrest, Elijah repeated, which means I own the building you're standing in, the grounds you claim to protect, and, as of this moment, your career. The crowd of onlookers grew, whispers spreading like wildfire. Gregory's bravado faltered. This is some kind of joke. It's no joke, Elijah said. You're done here. Effective immediately. Gregory's jaw tightened, his pride clashing with the reality of his situation. You can't do this. I've been here for years. And in that time, Elijah said, his voice steady, you've shown exactly why this club needed new leadership. Pack your things, Mr. Barnes. Gregory stared at him, rage and humiliation warring on his face. For a moment, it seemed as though he might protest further, but the murmurs of the crowd and the weight of Elijah's authority silenced him. Without another word, he turned and stormed away. Elijah watched him go, his expression unchanging. Then, addressing the gathered crowd, he said, Let this be the beginning of a new era for Ridgecrest, one where everyone, regardless of background, is welcome. The crowd erupted into applause, the sound echoing across the greens. Elijah nodded once, then turned and walked toward the clubhouse, the weight of his mission clear in every step. The Ridgecrest clubhouse brimmed with tension. Members filled the grand hall, seated at round tables adorned with white linen and floral centerpieces. Staff hovered nervously at the edges of the room, unsure what to expect. Everyone knew this was no ordinary gathering. The new owner, Elijah Walker, had called for a club-wide meeting to announce his vision for Ridgecrest Golf Club. Gregory Barnes was conspicuously absent. At precisely 6 p.m., Elijah entered the room. He was dressed sharply in a tailored navy suit, his commanding presence silencing the low murmur of conversation. He approached the podium, his footsteps echoing against the polished marble floors. As he stood before the crowd, his gaze swept across the room, meeting the eyes of members and staff alike. "Good evening," he began, his deep voice steady. "Thank you all for joining me. As many of you know, I am Elijah Walker, the new owner of Ridgecrest Golf Club." Polite applause rippled through the room, though it was tinged with unease. Elijah allowed the sound to fade before continuing. "I'm aware that change can be unsettling," he said. "Ridgecrest has a long history, and many of you have been a part of it for years. My goal is not to erase that history, but to build on it, to make this club better, stronger, and more inclusive." A few members exchanged wary glances. Elijah pressed on. "When I visited Ridgecrest for the first time, I was met with hostility, not hospitality. I was judged not for my character or my accomplishments, but for my appearance. That is not the Ridgecrest I believe in. That is not the kind of legacy I intend to uphold." The room fell silent. Elijah's words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. Even those who had initially harbored doubts about him found themselves nodding in agreement. "I'm here to make one thing clear," Elijah continued. "This club is now a place where everyone, regardless of race, background, or status, is treated with respect and dignity. We will welcome diversity, not shy away from it. We will foster community, not division." The room remained quiet, the gravity of his message sinking in. Then, to everyone's surprise, Elijah smiled. "Of course, golf is still at the heart of what we do," he said, his tone lightening. "But why shouldn't we enjoy the game while also setting a higher standard for how we treat each other?" A wave of applause broke out, this time louder and more genuine. Elijah waited for it to subside before addressing the staff directly. "To the employees of Ridgecrest," he said, "I know many of you have worked tirelessly to keep this place running. You've been the backbone of this club, and I want you to know that your efforts do not go unnoticed. Under my leadership, you'll receive fair treatment, competitive wages, and opportunities for growth." Several staff members exchanged hopeful glances. For years, they had felt undervalued, treated as little more than invisible cogs in a well-oiled machine. Elijah's words felt like a promise of long-overdue change. "And to our members," Elijah added, turning his attention back to the audience, "I know some of you may have reservations about these changes. That's okay. Change takes time. But I assure you, Ridgecrest will remain a premier destination for golf. The only difference is that we'll be setting a new standard, one we can all be proud of." The room buzzed with murmured conversations. Some members seemed inspired, while others wore skeptical expressions. Elijah anticipated resistance, but he wasn't deterred. He had faced far greater challenges than this. "Before I conclude," Elijah said, "there's one final matter to address. As many of you know, the former manager, Gregory Barnes, is no longer with us. His actions did not align with the values I envisioned for Ridgecrest, and it was necessary to part ways. I'm currently searching for a new manager, someone who embodies fairness, professionalism, and respect." A ripple of approval passed through the crowd. Gregory had made his share of enemies over the years, and few were sorry to see him go. "I'll leave you with this," Elijah said, his voice steady and resolute. "Ridgecrest is more than just a golf club. It's a community, and together we have the opportunity to make it a shining example of what's possible when we rise above prejudice and work toward a common goal. Thank you." This time, the applause was thunderous. Members and staff rose to their feet, their initial skepticism replaced by admiration. Elijah nodded graciously, then stepped away from the podium, leaving the crowd to absorb his words. As the meeting ended and attendees began to disperse, Elijah remained in the hall, speaking with those who approached him. Some offered congratulations, others voiced concerns, but all left with a newfound respect for the man who had dared to challenge the status quo. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the clubhouse, Gregory Barnes sat nursing a drink. Though he was no longer employed at Ridgecrest, he couldn't resist returning to hear what Elijah had to say. Watching the crowd's reaction from the shadows, Gregory felt a pang of bitterness, but also something unfamiliar: regret. For the first time, he began to wonder if he had been wrong. The news of Elijah Walker's announcement spread like wildfire, not just within the Ridgecrest Golf Club, but throughout the local community. For decades, Ridgecrest had been synonymous with exclusivity and elitism, a place where tradition often served as a shield against progress. Elijah's bold vision for inclusivity sparked a whirlwind of reactions, both supportive and hostile. The public outcry. In the days following the meeting, Ridgecrest became the talk of the town. Social media buzzed with debates over Elijah's leadership and the firing of Gregory Barnes. Supporters praised Elijah for taking a stand against discrimination, while critics accused him of dismantling the club's traditions. One particularly scathing editorial appeared in a local newspaper, accusing Elijah of forcing diversity at the expense of heritage. Elijah read it over his morning coffee, his face unreadable. "They're clinging to the past because they're afraid of the future," he murmured to his assistant, Maria, as he folded the paper and set it aside. "Do you want to issue a response?" Maria asked, her tone cautious. "No," Elijah said firmly. "Let them talk. Actions speak louder than words." Gregory's spiral. For Gregory Barnes, the fallout was personal and immediate. News of his dismissal reached the broader golf community, tarnishing his reputation. Invitations to exclusive events dried up, and whispers about his behavior at Ridgecrest circulated among his peers. Gregory spent his days sulking in his small apartment, nursing his wounded pride. He avoided calls from friends and family, too ashamed to admit his downfall. The worst blow came when a former colleague bluntly told him, "You had it coming, Greg. Maybe it's time to take a hard look at yourself." That night, Gregory sat alone in his living room, staring at a dusty photo of himself on the clubhouse balcony, a symbol of the power he once held. He poured himself another drink, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. The members divide. Meanwhile, Ridgecrest's members found themselves at a crossroads. Many, particularly younger members, embraced Elijah's vision. They saw his leadership as an opportunity to modernize the club and attract a more diverse membership. Others, however, resisted. A group of long-standing members organized a petition demanding that the board reinstate Gregory and preserve Ridgecrest's traditions. Their meetings were held in hushed tones at a nearby cafe, their resentment toward Elijah palpable. "Elijah Walker doesn't understand what Ridgecrest stands for," one member argued. "He's turning it into a circus." But their efforts failed to gain traction. The petition garnered only a handful of signatures, and the board, already impressed by Elijah's leadership, dismissed their demands outright. Elijah's determination, unfazed by the controversy, Elijah dove headfirst into his plans for Ridgecrest. He hired consultants to audit the club's operations, uncovering practices that had long gone unquestioned. One glaring discovery was the outdated membership process, which included a stringent referral system that disproportionately excluded minority applicants. "That changes immediately," Elijah instructed his team. "Open applications, fair evaluations, no more gatekeeping." He also organized community events at the club, inviting local schools and charities to use the facilities for free. One Saturday, a group of inner-city kids arrived at Ridgecrest for a golf clinic hosted by Elijah himself. Watching their wide-eyed wonder as they stepped onto the pristine greens, Elijah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "This is what Ridgecrest should be about," he told Maria, as the children laughed and practiced their swings, giving everyone a chance. Gregory's chance. Elijah's impact wasn't lost on Gregory, who had been following the club's transformation from afar. One evening, after finishing his third drink, Gregory decided to visit Ridgecrest. He told himself it was just to see how much damage Elijah had done, but deep down, he was seeking something more, perhaps closure, or even redemption. Arriving under the cover of dusk, Gregory lingered near the entrance, unsure of what he hoped to accomplish. To his surprise, Elijah spotted him and approached with an even, measured stride. "Gregory," Elijah said, his tone neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." Gregory shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to see what you've done to the place." Elijah crossed his arms, studying the man who had once tried to bar him from entering. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elijah said, "Why don't you come inside? We can talk." Gregory blinked, caught off guard. "You're inviting me in? After everything?" "I believe in second chances," Elijah replied, "but only if you're willing to own your mistakes." The conversation. In a quiet corner of the clubhouse, Elijah and Gregory sat across from each other. Elijah's calm demeanor only made Gregory feel more acutely the weight of his actions. "I was wrong," Gregory admitted after a long silence. "I let my biases get the better of me, and I've paid for it." Elijah nodded. "That's a start. But words aren't enough. Change takes action." Gregory frowned. "What do you want me to do? Grovel?" "I don't want anything from you," Elijah said. "But if you truly regret your actions, you'll find a way to make amends, not just to me, but to everyone you've wronged." Gregory swallowed hard. "And if I don't?" Elijah leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "Then you'll spend the rest of your life as a bitter man who lost everything because he couldn't see beyond his own prejudice. The choice is yours." Gregory stared at him, the weight of Elijah's words sinking in. For the first time in years, he felt something other than anger, a glimmer of self-awareness. The turning point. As Gregory left the clubhouse that night, he knew he was at a crossroads. He could continue down the path of bitterness and regret, or he could take Elijah's challenge to heart. Back at his apartment, Gregory opened his laptop and began drafting a letter of apology, not just to Elijah, but to the staff and members of Ridgecrest. It was the first step in what he hoped would be a long road to redemption. Meanwhile, Elijah continued to push forward, undeterred by the obstacles in his path. For him, the fallout wasn't just a battle to win. It was a chance to transform Ridgecrest into a beacon of progress and possibility. Gregory Barnes sat at his desk, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop. The cursor blinked on the page where his apology letter began with just 2 words. "I'm sorry." He had rewritten the opening line more times than he could count, yet nothing seemed to convey the depth of his regret, or the weight of his pride. The words wouldn't come. Not easily, at least. Gregory's life had been built on control and power, 2 things that now felt irretrievably lost. And yet, Elijah's challenge echoed in his mind. Change takes action. Elijah's challenge. At Ridgecrest, Elijah had moved forward without waiting for Gregory's response. The staff felt energized by the new culture, and the members who stayed saw the benefits of his leadership. Membership applications surged as word of Ridgecrest's transformation spread. Even so, Elijah couldn't ignore Gregory's absence from the conversation. Did the man really have it in him to change? He wondered. One afternoon, Elijah called his assistant Maria into his office. "Reach out to Gregory," he said. "Invite him to the community open house next week. I want him to see what Ridgecrest has become and what it could have been under his leadership." Maria hesitated. "Do you think he'll come, after everything?" Elijah smiled faintly. "That's up to him." The letter Gregory spent the better part of the night wrestling with himself before finally pressing send. His letter to Elijah wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Subject: a letter of apology. Dear Mr. Walker, I owe you an apology, though words alone can't undo the harm I've caused. I was wrong to treat you the way I did when you first visited Ridgecrest. My actions weren't just unprofessional, they were rooted in biases I've refused to confront for far too long. You gave me an opportunity to reflect, and for that, I'm grateful. I hope one day to earn back the respect I've lost, not just from you, but from everyone I've hurt along the way. Sincerely, Gregory Barnes. Elijah read the email the next morning, his expression thoughtful. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he forwarded the message to Maria with a note. Invite him to the open house personally. The open house. The Ridgecrest Community Open House was unlike anything the club had hosted before. Families from all backgrounds poured through the gates, eager to experience what was once an untouchable bastion of exclusivity. Kids played on the greens, local vendors set up booths, and a live jazz band filled the air with music. Gregory arrived just after noon, his hands clammy as he walked through the gates. He felt out of place, not because of the crowd, but because of the weight of his past. For years, Ridgecrest had been his kingdom, but now it felt like he was trespassing. "Mr. Barnes!" Gregory turned to see Maria approaching, her smile warm but professional. "Mr. Walker asked me to welcome you. He's at the clubhouse if you'd like to join him." Gregory nodded, his throat dry. "Thank you." The meeting Elijah was on the clubhouse terrace, speaking with a group of local leaders, when Gregory arrived. As their eyes met, Elijah excused himself and walked over, his expression neutral. "Gregory," Elijah said, "I didn't expect to see you so soon." "You invited me," Gregory replied, his voice quiet. "I wasn't sure if I should come." "And yet here you are," Elijah said, gesturing to a chair. "Sit." Gregory obeyed, feeling uncharacteristically small under Elijah's calm scrutiny. After a moment, Elijah spoke. "I read your letter," he said. "It's a start." Gregory looked down at his hands. "I meant every word." Elijah studied him for a long moment. "Tell me, Gregory, why now? Why do you want to change?" Gregory hesitated, then said, "Because I'm tired of who I've been. I let my pride and ignorance dictate my actions for too long. I see now that it's cost me everything." Elijah nodded slowly. "Acknowledging that is the first step. But what are you going to do about it?" Gregory blinked. "What do you mean?" Elijah leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You can apologize all you want, but redemption comes from action. Are you ready to do the work?" Gregory hesitated. The idea of confronting his biases, of proving himself to a community he'd wronged, felt daunting. But then he thought of everything he'd lost and everything he could regain. "Yes," he said finally, "I'm ready." A chance to prove himself. Over the next few weeks, Gregory became a familiar face at Ridgecrest, not as a manager, but as a volunteer. Elijah gave him small tasks at first, helping organize events, assisting with the junior golf program, and shadowing the new manager to understand the changes being implemented. It wasn't easy. Some staff were openly hostile, and members who remembered his past behavior greeted him with cold stares. But Gregory didn't complain. He showed up every day, worked hard, and accepted criticism without defensiveness. Gradually, people began to soften. They saw a man trying to make amends, not for personal gain, but because he genuinely wanted to be better. The turning point. One Saturday morning, during a community golf clinic, Gregory was paired with a young boy named Marcus. The boy, about 10 years old, struggled with his swings, growing visibly frustrated. "Relax your grip," Gregory said, crouching beside him, "and keep your eye on the ball." Marcus tried again, and this time the ball soared. His face lit up with a grin. "I did it." "You did," Gregory said, smiling. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of pride, not in himself, but in helping someone else succeed. Elijah, watching from a distance, nodded in approval. For a new path. By the end of the summer, Gregory had become an integral part of Ridgecrest's transformation. He wasn't the man he used to be, and the community began to accept him as one of their own. Elijah, ever the pragmatist, didn't fully trust Gregory yet, but he respected the effort. "Keep this up," he told Gregory one afternoon, "and you might just earn your redemption." Gregory nodded, his resolve firm. "I will." Summer turned to fall, and the Ridgecrest Golf Club stood transformed. The pristine greens remained as immaculate as ever, but the atmosphere had shifted. Gone were the stiff, exclusive airs that once defined the club. In their place was a vibrant sense of community. Families strolled the grounds, local schools hosted tournaments, and new members brought fresh energy to a place that had once resisted change. Elijah Walker's vision was coming to life. Easter's sure Gregory's redemption. By now, Gregory Barnes had become a familiar, albeit surprising presence at Ridgecrest. His role was unofficial, more volunteer than employee, but his dedication was impossible to ignore. He arrived early each morning, ready to help with whatever needed doing, whether that meant setting up events, cleaning equipment, or mentoring the junior golf team. The staff, once skeptical, had warmed to him. Gregory no longer barked orders or clung to authority. Instead, he listened, learned, and lent a hand wherever he could. One afternoon, Elijah called Gregory into his office. The room was bright, the windows offering a sweeping view of the 18th hole. Gregory stood nervously, unsure of what to expect. "Sit down, Gregory," Elijah said, gesturing to a chair. Gregory obeyed, his hands resting on his knees. "Something on your mind, Mr. Walker?" Elijah smiled faintly. "You can call me Elijah." Gregory nodded, but his nerves didn't fade. "I wanted to talk about your role here," Elijah said. "You've been putting in the work and people have noticed. I've noticed." Gregory shifted in his seat. "I'm just trying to make up for the harm I caused." "And you're doing a good job of that," Elijah said. "But it's time we talk about the future. Ridgecrest is growing, and I need people I can trust to help lead it." Gregory's eyes widened. You're offering me a position?" "Not yet," Elijah said, his tone measured. "This is a trial run. I want to see if you can handle more responsibility. If you can prove you're ready, there may be a permanent place for you here." Gregory swallowed hard. The idea of stepping back into a leadership role both thrilled and terrified him. "I won't let you down," he said. "We'll see," Elijah said. "For now, focus on the task at hand. Show me that you've truly changed." The Junior Tournament. One of Ridgecrest's biggest events of the year was the annual Junior Golf Tournament. Under Elijah's leadership, the tournament had been open to young players from all backgrounds. Drawing competitors from across the region, Gregory was tasked with coordinating the event, a responsibility that tested his organizational skills and patience. He spent weeks ensuring every detail was perfect, from arranging practice sessions to securing sponsorships for prizes. The day of the tournament arrived, and the course buzzed with excitement. Parents cheered from the sidelines as young golfers navigated the challenging course. Gregory moved among the crowd, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Near the 16th hole, he spotted Marcus, the boy he had mentored, lining up for a critical putt. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the club, his nerves getting the better of him. Gregory crouched beside him. "What's the rule I taught you?" Marcus glanced at him, his brow furrowed. "Relax my grip. Keep my eye on the ball." Gregory smiled. "That's right. You've got this." Marcus nodded, took a deep breath, and swung. The ball rolled cleanly into the hole, and the crowd erupted in applause. Marcus turned to Gregory, his face glowing with pride. "You're a natural," Gregory said, ruffling the boy's hair. Elijah, watching from a distance, nodded approvingly. Gregory was proving himself, not just as a worker, but as a mentor and a leader. A farewell and a new beginning. As Ridgecrest thrived, some of its long-time members began to drift away. Those who clung to the old ways found themselves increasingly out of place in the new Ridgecrest. One afternoon, Elijah received a letter from Charles Aldridge, the chairman of the club's former board. It was polite but curt, announcing Charles's resignation as a member. Elijah read the letter in silence, then set it aside. Maria, who had seen the letter, asked, "Do you think he'll come back?" Elijah shook his head. "Some people can't accept change, no matter how much good it brings. But that's their loss, not ours." Ridgecrest had moved on, and so had Elijah. Gregory's promotion. 2 months after the junior tournament, Elijah called another staff meeting. The clubhouse buzzed with speculation as employees gathered, curious about the announcement. When everyone had settled, Elijah stepped forward, his commanding presence silencing the room. "As you all know, Ridgecrest has undergone tremendous change in the past year," he began, "and none of it would have been possible without the hard work and dedication of this team." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then he turned to Gregory. "Gregory Barnes," Elijah said, his voice steady, "you've proven that change is possible, not just for Ridgecrest, but for yourself. Your efforts haven't gone unnoticed, and I'm pleased to announce that, effective immediately, you'll be joining Ridgecrest's leadership team as assistant manager." The room erupted in applause. Gregory, visibly stunned, rose to his feet. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't deserve this, but I'll do everything I can to earn it." Elijah extended a hand, and Gregory shook it firmly. "You've already started," Elijah said. A symbol of progress. As the meeting ended, Gregory stood on the clubhouse terrace, looking out over the course. He thought of the man he had been, the arrogance, the prejudice, the mistakes, and compared him to the man he was becoming. Elijah joined him, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To new beginnings," Elijah said, handing Gregory a glass. Gregory hesitated, then clinked his glass against Elijah's. "To new beginnings," he echoed. For both men, Ridgecrest was more than just a golf club. It was a symbol of transformation, a place where mistakes could be forgiven, change could take root, and hope could thrive. Winter arrived at Ridgecrest Golf Club, blanketing the grounds in a layer of frost that sparkled in the early morning sunlight. For Elijah Walker, the change in seasons marked a full year since he had first set foot on the property, a year filled with challenges, triumphs, and transformation. He stood on the clubhouse balcony, sipping his coffee and watching a group of young golfers practice on the driving range. Among them was Marcus, now one of Ridgecrest's rising stars, his swing smooth and confident. "This is exactly what I dreamed Ridgecrest could be," Elijah murmured to himself. A club transformed. Ridgecrest's evolution, under Elijah's leadership, was undeniable. Membership had grown significantly, drawing a diverse group of people who appreciated both the quality of the course and the welcoming atmosphere Elijah had cultivated. The club had also become a hub for community engagement. Charity tournaments, junior golf clinics, and open days brought life to the grounds, creating connections between people from all walks of life. Ridgecrest was no longer just a club for the elite. It was a place where the game of golf served as a bridge, not a barrier. The staff, once hesitant about Elijah's changes, now embraced his vision wholeheartedly. Many credited him with revitalizing the club and fostering an environment of respect and opportunity. Gregory Barnes, now serving as assistant manager, had become a key figure in this transformation. His journey from disgraced manager to respected leader was the talk of Ridgecrest, a story of redemption that inspired others to reflect on their own biases and actions. Gregory's speech. On a crisp December evening, Ridgecrest hosted its first annual Legacy Gala, a fundraiser supporting youth golf programs and community initiatives. The clubhouse shimmered with twinkling lights and festive decorations as members, staff, and guests gathered for the event. Elijah had insisted that Gregory give the opening speech, a decision that Gregory met with equal parts pride and trepidation. Standing at the podium, Gregory took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across the room. "A year ago," he began, "I stood in this very clubhouse as a very different man. I was arrogant, blind to my own flaws, and unwilling to embrace change. And because of that, I nearly lost everything." The room was silent, the audience hanging on his every word. "But someone gave me a second chance," Gregory continued, his voice steady. "Elijah Walker didn't have to forgive me. He didn't have to let me back through these doors. But he believed that people could change if they were willing to do the work. And because of that, I stand before you today, not as the man I was, but as the man I'm striving to become." Applause erupted, loud and genuine. Gregory smiled, a rare mix of humility and gratitude softening his features. "This club has transformed," he said, "and it's all thanks to a leader who refused to accept the way things were. Elijah Walker showed us that change isn't just possible, it's necessary, and I'm honored to be a part of that journey." Elijah's reflection. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Elijah found a quiet moment to himself on the clubhouse terrace. He looked out over the course, now illuminated by the soft glow of the moon. Maria joined him, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "You should be proud," she said, handing him a glass. "Tonight was a success." Elijah smiled. "Ridgecrest is a success because of the people here. This place is about more than just golf now. It's about community, growth, and second chances." Maria nodded. "You've built something incredible. What's next?" Elijah chuckled. "Next? We keep going. There's always more to do." A legacy. Cemented. The following spring, Ridgecrest received national recognition as one of the most inclusive and forward-thinking golf clubs in the country. Articles highlighted Elijah's leadership, the club's transformation, and the cultural shift it represented. Elijah, however, deflected the praise. "Ridgecrest isn't about me," he told a reporter. "It's about what happens when people come together to create something better." For the local community, Ridgecrest became a symbol of what could be achieved through determination, vision, and the courage to challenge outdated norms. The final scene. On a sunny afternoon, Elijah stood near the first tee, watching Marcus prepare for a shot. Gregory was nearby, offering advice to a group of young players. The air was filled with laughter, the sound of golf balls hitting their mark, and the rustle of the wind through the trees. "Perfect," Elijah said quietly, a contented smile spreading across his face. As Marcus's ball soared down the fairway, Elijah turned and walked back toward the clubhouse, leaving behind a legacy not just of change, but of hope, progress, and the power of second chances.